is an invitation to people. What my father would often use when he was greeting various dignitaries and groups from around the world to this space that we call Minhrpa and Minithni, where we're from in Morley, Alberta. I am a member of the Cowesses First Nation and a descendant of the treaty signers from Treaty Number 7, ancestor Kichikwat, which means good Stoney. We are carrying on that legacy of our ancestors by doing this work here today, coming to you to share, to offer our words of encouragement, words of understanding, words of teaching. I am the Indigenous Minister for the Chinook Winds Region, Southern Alberta for the United Church of Canada. My brother, who spoke earlier, is the Indigenous Minister for the Pacific Mountain Region for BC. And so we work with the church to try to bring better results for reconciliation efforts, working with various communities, denominations, interfaith groups, try to bridge that understanding, because we are carrying on a work that is necessary, especially at this time, when we see the degradation of our traditions, of our people, of our youth and children. We're coming up in a world of challenges, some that they will not be able to overcome. And so as we gather here in this heat, I know it's 35 degrees, I'm hoping that everyone is in a shady spot there, because we care for other people. We care to share and to bring understanding. When the first missionaries came to this area, when the first explorers came to this area, they encountered the Stoney people and their hospitality. They were not met with aggression, they were not met with violence. They were welcomed, because we welcomed the stranger, and they were taken through the mountain passes in peace and led to the other side as they wanted. The missionaries, in the very beginning, were in a survival mode, so they had a very different approach to their interaction with the First Peoples. The missionary, Reverend Robert Rundle, whom the mountain is named after, was a Methodist missionary who learned our language, who conducted services in our language, and who conducted marriages in our language. When the first mission schools were built in the 1800s, the Stoney parents were sending their kids to the school to become educated. And so they had a letter that went to the government saying, we have so many kids here that we need a housing space for them. That began the residential school in Morley. And so there's traditions of understanding that we are not hostile to the world around us, but we are welcoming. And over time, we have learned that those relationships can be broken. After the treaty signing, the lands taken up by the church, taken up by the missionaries, taken up by the missionaries' families, showed us that they weren't living into what they were preaching. My father became a missionary, or became a minister, because my grandfather was also doing that type of work. He would go to people's houses on the reserve and read them the Cree Bible and talk about their spirituality, talk about God. This was the role of our family, traditionally, as a line of hereditary chiefs, and also as this component of the Christianity that we practiced. The Christianity that was brought here in the 1850s was brought by a Anishinaabe missionary named Henry Bird Steinhauer, who was the Governor General of Alberta. Ralph Steiner was a descendant of that person. And so that person set up 4 churches in Alberta. One in Morley, one in Muskogee, called Ubima before that, and the one at Saddle Lake, Goodfish Lake. And those 4 churches still exist. Those 4 churches are very independent-minded churches because of the way that we were brought to Christianity. The missionary said, here's the Bible. Here's a good book that can help you, and use this to help and heal your people and learn from it. And so that's what the Stoney people did. For 40 years, they practiced their own form of Christianity that we continue today. That we continue in things like the ecumenical conference that happened in the 1970s, where we had over 10,000 people gather at the Stoney Park in Morley, Alberta. So this is the one trajectory of history that we understand. That we are meant to work and help one another. The other trajectory is what we see here, an exclusion and a loss. The Cave and Basin monument, the area there called Minhrpa, is a holy area. And it is because of that area that we have the park today. It is the Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, in 1883, setting aside that national park as the first national park in Canada, that said we have to protect that area, but it was to protect the area from the Indigenous people and to monetize that into what we see today. And so all of our sacred areas in this valley that are watched over by the Guardian Mountain retain that sense of a spiritual landscape. In Morley, we have Mount Yamnuthka. And so that mountain is God's seat on earth to us. It is our Mount Zion. The Cypress Hills off to the east are another landmark place, a holy place, a place where we would go to do Sundance, a place that we would go where Sitting Bull came up to Canada. It is like our Jerusalem. It is a sacred place. Here in this land, we have all these sacred monuments. Inewanka, which is the water, the lake of the spirits, a place of power. Many of these things that we see here today that have been commercialized or have been adopted by the Canadian and Banff Park area are ceremonial areas and places that we hold in our traditions as important because they connect us to the Creator, they connect us to one another, they connect us to our ancestors. They're an important part of who we are. When we talk about being related to the land, it is this sense of being centered within the land and to know who we are because we are called to that land. One of our elders from another part of the country came here and declared that this was not their area. They could not be from here because they couldn't talk to the trees. They couldn't talk to the waters. They didn't understand them. We have a deep-rooted, sacred connection to these spaces. And through our practice, we nurture these spaces, we steward these spaces, we pray to and minister to these spaces to know that we are doing our part as Yethka people to fulfill God's role for us. And so when we come here to this space that we have been excluded from for a long time, and maybe for the one time only that we'll be doing this, we are very cognizant of the meaningfulness of doing this and the people who are here to listen, the children who are witnessing. That's an important part of transmitting that to the next generation. Oftentimes we bring children to events and they are there running around making a lot of noise, but they are there as witnesses and they will remember later in life being here for this reason. And the heat and the speakers and the bounty, and they may not understand, but the recognition of what it is to be in the land what it is to be connected amongst these people, all listening, all paying attention. There's a gift there, and that gift transcends what we do. So the time of reconciliation has not yet come. The time of building relationship is still on the forefront. As we do this work, and as we try to deal with a lot of the issues that have come up of churches getting burned down and graves being found, of mass graves being found, which is in itself a genocide and an atrocity that should never have happened. It wasn't until 1935 that the government decreed that you had to even report the death of children in residential school. So these records, these grave sites, a lot of them are unknown. And so the 139 schools that were mentioned, those are a fraction of the schools that existed. These are only the schools that the government lawyers permitted to be included in the settlement agreement. They're not all the schools. And our people were not just sent to McDougall School or the Edmonton School. We have people who were on record in Saskatchewan and in Manitoba, sent out far, probably as they thought of them as troublesome youth, and were not allowed to come back, and most likely died in those areas. And so there's that history that we're learning here today, and the reason for doing this. And after this Indigenous Month was quickly put together through the Residential School Settlement Agreement in 2008, and then the Indigenous Month was declared in 2009, almost as a footnote. And so Indigenous Month, we just completed, and into Canada Day. I think a lot of it was song and dance, and a lot of it was performance. But here, when we reach the tangible pain of our elders, when we reach the youth speaking out, this is where our community is at. And this is the community that in places like Banff, Canmore, Cochrane have to confront. And so we're working continuously with these communities to try to build relationship, build understanding. It's part of that calls to action because it affects municipalities, affects churches, affects governments. All this work that needs to be done. So we're thankful that you have stayed here to the end of this. And my nephew will be speaking next. Thankful to Daryl and to Kyle for their energy behind this and working with the townspeople to bring this about. It's a rare opportunity, and I hope that it's not the last one, because there's still things that we need to discuss and things that need to be lifted up as we work towards a better future for our children and their children. There's a lot that needs to be considered.